Hello, I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad, and welcome to the show. And thank you for joining me. So in this video, what I'm going to talk about is obviously we've had a huge round of elections last week that we had the locals, we had the mayoral election, we had the Runcorn by-election, and what we saw was, I think, nothing short of a reform wave. If you like. Reform Party did very well. Labour Party did poorly, but given they're in government, they could have done worse. But there are lessons there and the things they have to worry about. And the Tories did absolutely abysmally. So let's talk about that. And really what I want to talk about is what could Labour do and what could the Conservatives do to try and turn things around? How could they come out of this poor set of results and reassert themselves? Labour in the hopes of obviously remaining in government after the next election. The Conservative Party seeing off reform and sort of reasserting themselves as the dominant centre-right party in Britain. So I think obviously the first thing to say is the next general election is a very long way away, but I think there are some things to sort of chat about. Obviously, the Labour Party got about 34% at the 2024 general election. That was fairly low, considering the fact that they got 400 seats. A lot was made of that, except, hey, first past the post is the voting system employed by the United Kingdom, and that's what it does. You can get a very low amount. You can have a very low vote share and get a lot of seats, and you can have quite a high vote share and get very few seats, as many parties down through the years have noticed. And there tends to be a breaking point at which you sort of go above a certain point and you start to get, loads and loads and loads of seats. Hundreds start to fall your way. And you go below a certain point and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds fall away, which I think Reform and the Tories might possibly find out about in opposite directions at the next general election. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. The Labour Party are now polling at about 24 to 26%, 24, 25, 26. And actually, if you're looking at how they did in the elections last Thursday, then really we're talking about that being that seems somewhat accurate. I mean, I think one of the things that we really learned from last week, the 2025 elections, is that the polling is roughly accurate at the moment. Reform seem to be slightly ahead of Labour, and Labour seem to be somewhat ahead of the Conservative Party, who are almost solidly in third. The Lib Dem vote is in flux, but and it's hard to tell really from local elections because Lib Dems tend to do better in those. But nonetheless, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what should the Conservative Party do now to rebuild, and what should the Labour Party do to try and turn their electoral successes around. I'm going to start with the Conservative Party, partly because it's easier, actually, because straightforwardly, the biggest thing that's not working for them is Kemi Badenoch. Kemi is not working. It's not working. You can see it in the polls. You can see it in the results. You can try and make the excuse that, she's only had, 6 months and she needs longer than that. And that might hold if it weren't for the fact that Reform are now sort of biting on 30% and the Tories are looking increasingly irrelevant, and Kemi doesn't have the time. She isn't William Hague. She doesn't have, a whole parliament to get over this. I think that if the results keep being as poor as they are, if they start to really poll under 20%, a lot, I think after 2026 she could be gone. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe by the time this video goes out, Kemi Badenoch will be gone. I mean, UK politics is that volatile, but I really doubt it. I would be very shocked if you're watching this and that's happened. I'd say she isn't working for two main reasons, okay? And one of which is she's bad at politics, as in she's not a very good politician. People often say, I've heard this from people who are very reliable sources within the Conservative Party, that, Kemi's so much fun, actually, in person. Actually, she's a great laugh, and she's got this wonderful sense of humor, etc. I mean, that could be so great, but actually, the skill of the politician is actually to be more interesting to the public than you are behind closed doors. You know, it's like being an actor. You know, if you're if you're really a funny person and you have incredible charisma when you're just around a group of people, but you're flat as a pancake on the screen, I mean, probably acting isn't for you, I'd have to say. And I'd say the same thing about, you know, Kemi in politics. I think there was a great example on the campaign trail. It happened last week. It was in the run-in to Thursday. And she made a real point in an interview of saying, well, you know, Keir Starmer hasn't been to Runcorn to campaign once, which, of course, then just led the interviewer to point out immediately, well, actually, Kemi, you haven't been to Runcorn either. To which she answered, well, I have a day job. I think being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom counts as a day job, Kemi. I'm really sorry to break that to you. I think probably, I hate to say it as well, more so than the Leader of the Opposition, which, I'm going to be honest, is kind of a fake job in a way. I mean, it's important. I know maybe I'm being controversial there, but I think the Prime Minister is simply more important. It's a perfect example of why she's bad at this. I mean, because even if you got her the best advisors in the world, right, who could tell her exactly to do this, say this, avoid this. I mean, she'd probably improve, but actually that was an on-the-spot thing where she tried a line and it had blown up in her face, and a really good politician would find like a Tony Blair or somebody, or, you know, Bill Clinton or somebody who's, you know, sort of that level, would have found a way to just reverse out of that problem. I mean, like, no, you know, they wouldn't have missed a beat. They would have said, oh, well, yes, but you have to understand that Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister and it's important for him to play. I mean, I don't know what I would have said, but I'm saying that someone like Blair or Clinton would have come up with something, not, well, I have a day job, which is a terrible response, which was rightly pilloried on social media because it was terrible. So anyway, the second reason she's failing is that her strategy, it's not that her strategy is wrong, because that's not enough to say, because you can have wrong strategies, but there are wrong strategies and there are wrong strategies. I mean, her strategy is so wrong that it's pretty much the opposite strategy to anything that could possibly work for turning the Tory fortunes around. Because if you look at the thing the Tories need to do, people don't trust them. People are angry at them for, well, A, broken promises, and B, they just didn't turn things around. And people feel like the economy hasn't got better and the NHS is much worse. And people who care about immigration are upset that they sort of made all these promises around immigration and none of them sort of came to fruition. They're angry about Brexit from two ways. So they're angry about Brexit. They're either angry about Brexit because they voted for Brexit, or they wanted Brexit to happen and they feel like the Brexit they got isn't what was promised, or they didn't want Brexit and they blame the Tories for inflicting Brexit on us. So they get blame for that from both angles. And so they need to mitigate all that. Those are the issues they have, and they need to find ways to mitigate it. So they need to advance some sort of pro-business position, because they've lost a lot of trust with business people. I know that from my own experience. A lot of business people don't think the Tories are the party for them. So they really need to focus on the economy. I mean, you've got things that are sort of should be a kind of a gift to them, like Labour's employers' NI rises. I mean, that should be something that the Tories should just be on about all the time, right? How, you know, actually, I know you didn't think we did this, but actually, look, this is what you've got with Labour. You know, we are actually the guys who know how to handle the economy. They really need to think about how to win back voters in their old heartlands, which is mainly sort of basically the southern England seats they lost to the Lib Dems. Those are all seats they could get back. I mean, really, the Lib Dems, I think, and this could change as time goes on, because that's what happens. People vote for a party as a sort of protest, and then what happens is the thing they were protesting about doesn't get any better, and what they end up doing then is continuing to vote for the party they protested on, but then they sort of convince themselves that actually they are a Lib Dem voter now, and that's all it is. And then there's no way back, and that's it. I think there's just no route to any sort of majority that the Tories could even think of, or even a significant rebuild in opposition. than getting those seats back. And they're not thinking about it at all. They don't seem to be trying to do that in any way. So, I mean, do you know who can summarize this best, actually, is Nigel Farage, oddly enough. So I'm going to give you a Farage quote. This is a word-for-word Nigel Farage quote, okay? Kemi Badenoch, please stay. I mean, please don't resign. We want you to stay on as leader. I'll put some money in it, if you like, to keep you there. No, you can say she's got an impossible job. The Conservative Party is split, and what you'll see tomorrow as the West Country results come in is you'll see a stack of 2021 Conservative votes that have come to us, but also gone to the Liberal Democrats as well. The Conservatives are standing in the middle of the road in terms of their own supporters and getting hit by vehicles coming both ways. He's exactly right. I mean, I'm sorry to say that, Nigel Farage is absolutely bang on, but he is. That's a great explanation of what is happening to the Conservative Party. Liberal people are going, what is all this stuff they're doing? They just seem to just never shut up about trans people or whatever it is. And like, what can they just talk about the economy or something that's relevant to my life? What the hell is this? I'm just going to vote Lib Dem until they stop doing this. And meanwhile, the reform voters that they think they're trying to appeal to, they're never going to get them because most of them hate the Conservative Party with a passion. Trust me, I've talked to enough reform voters, activists particularly, over the last month or so, and they really don't like the Conservative Party at all. The idea that somehow the Tories could do some little thing or they could say one thing and a bunch of some chunk of that reform vote are going to come back. No, I mean, what kills reform is a Tory revival along the lines of, probably like rising in the polls again and making reform seem like an insignificant vote, and actually where you get a lot of the sort of right-leaning vote coming back because they're scared of Labour and the Tories seem like a safer bet. That's the only way. The idea that they can out-reform, out-Farage, no chance, zero chance. I'm giving it a 0% chance. Cannot work. Kemi Badenoch cannot do it. Robert Jenrick can't do it. There's no one who's a sitting Tory MP that would come close to being able to do it. So they should stop doing that. So they should get rid of Badenoch, immediately. They're not going to. I realize that. And part of it is, the reason is, well, actually, the members will just pick Robert Jenrick. And Jenrick might turn out to be even worse and even more of a gift to reform because he's going to push them further to the right, and it's just not going to work. And so I genuinely think we might be in a sort of strange death of conservative England kind of place at the moment. I'm referring, of course, to... there was a great book, which you should all read if you haven't anyway, by a chap named George Dangerfield. In 1935, he wrote a book, and it was looking back on this after the whole thing had kind of happened. But the death of the Liberal Party, the old Liberal Party. So if some of you don't know, in 1906... the Liberal Party won a huge majority. It was later described as a victory from which they could never recover. And basically things just went horribly wrong for them over the next sort of 10, 15, 20 years. And by the time we get to 1935, they don't exist at all as a national party. They have, I believe, 6 MPs at that point. And Labour have taken their place as the main rival to the Conservative Party. I think we could be in a situation where that happens to the Conservative Party. I think we are entering a phase where if the Conservative Party don't stop, like if they don't start doing things to reverse the rot that has set in, then I think we are genuinely looking at, them being wiped off the map for all intents and purposes. So anyway, I will leave the Tories there, and now we'll talk about Labour. What do Labour have to do? The advantage and disadvantage they have is exactly the same thing, which is they are the government. The advantage of being in government is you can actually do things. You can actually go, we did. If you do something good, you can point to it, and that can be very, very powerful. The disadvantage is you've got everything to fix and everything's your fault. So they have to lean on the advantage bit of that quite hard. I think by the next election, people have to have seen the NHS as having been improved in some major sense. Because I think one of the things they want to run against Farage is going to privatise the NHS, Farage. I don't think that really cuts through unless people feel like the NHS has improved quite a lot under Labour. And they feel like this, they really want to save that. And they actually want a continuation to some degree of what Labour's program around that is. I'm not saying they have to fix every single problem that the NHS faces. I just think people need to feel that it's better in a concrete and notable way. Because, Starmer wants to present a sort of stick with the devil you know narrative, and, oh God, with reform you're going to get to this big revolution and it's going to be horrible. Doesn't really work unless the devil you know is something worth saving. It's a classic of electoral politics, but really applies to Labour more than ever in this situation. I think they need to start treating the Conservative Party as an irrelevance and really focus on reform. They really are starting to do that anyway. They probably need to push more in that direction. I realize they have to be careful because the Tories remain the official opposition for the time being, and they have to face Badenoch at PMQs and all that stuff. There's a load of official things that make it quite difficult in the system that we run for them to ignore the Tories completely. But I think for the most part, they really need to see the Reform Party as increasingly as the rivals at the next general election and act accordingly. And other than that, it's really hard. I think a lot of people, in a generic sense, want the Labour Party to be more, quote unquote, left wing. They want Labour to be more radical in some sense, and there's this idea if they're more radical, that will solve the problems. The thing about radical policy making is if it works out, it's a massive win. The point is it's actually a huge gamble to be radical, because if it works out, big wins. If it fails, it blows up in your face and huge losses. Starmer does at this point have at least that kind of, he's the middle manager guy. And in a world where the Tories are no longer significant, that's not really to be entirely quibbled with. I think people miss that about Starmer as one of his selling points, actually. Having said that, I think they need to differentiate themselves from Reform. I think they need an offer that can really stand out as being significantly different to what Reform have to offer. Because I just think, you're going to get Reform, vote for us to avoid that, doesn't really work as messaging if people are like, well, it's kind of the same. And actually, at least I kind of like Farage more, and he's a bit more exciting, and what the hell? That's the danger for Labour. So, sure, every once in a while come up with something radical, but I would honestly argue that things like cutting the winter fuel allowance was probably pretty radical. From the right, but very much a pretty radical thing. Something the Tories would have been terrified to do, simply because it will be so unpopular amongst older voters. It apparently came up on the doorstep in Runcorn. People were upset about it. It's something that Reform, capitalized on as much as they could. And again, they won by 6 votes. So maybe there's something in that. In terms of radical economics, actually the budget, Rachel Reeves's budget, was fairly left wing. I hate to break it to you people, but it was genuinely one of the most left wing budgets we've had in a long time. And we're seeing things like parts of the steel industry being nationalized again. They're trying to avoid taxing sort of quote unquote working people, but actually they're putting taxes up everywhere else. So I think the idea that there's some sort of radical center-right government, or there's some sort of middling, or however you want to put it, there's some sort of center-right government, I just don't think holds water, at least not on economics. And so this idea that if they went way more to the left, it would work out. Maybe not. That's the thing. I think it's a risk either way. But I think one of the problems for Labour is they're going to have to take some risks at some point, I think, in order to be able to have something to say against Farage next time. But by the same token, there's going to be such a temptation to just keep going down the middle of the road, particularly with the Tories probably continuing to fade, and the kind of idea of actually let's just play it safe, and let's just so that we can say, well, look, the Tories are out of it. It's going to be us or Farage, and scare people about Farage. And does that work? Does that not? Again, you go more radical. It's risky, but the rewards could be huge. Go middle management and middle of the road. I guess you kind of know what you're getting, but in the end, it could be not enough to see off Farage next time. I think particularly given how quickly we're seeing their ground game come together, how quickly we're seeing their media campaign come together, how quickly their social media presence is gaining in professionalism. I mean, I was really amazed by some of the campaigning videos that Reform did. They were actually genuinely excellent. I mean, I just have to hold my hands up and say, yes, against a lot of the conservative stuff that's really looks amateurish now, and the Labour stuff that varies in terms of quality. So yeah, I think I'll end it there. I don't want to hammer the point. So Labour and the Tories, in summary, have a lot to do, but I think there are huge risks for Labour. With the Tories, it's more obvious, but actually, weirdly, they're not going to probably do any of it because they seem stuck in some sort of death spiral. And when you do that, you tend to just, for whatever reason, stick to the things that don't work. It's a strange quirk of human nature. Anyway, I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. Thank you for joining me. I've really appreciated talking to you. As always, thank you to the Bloomsbury Radio and the Bloomsbury Institute. I try and say it every time. Obviously, the views reflected here are my own and don't necessarily reflect Bloomsbury in any way. And thank you to my producer, Barra Fitzgibbon. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds